Hey guys, welcome back to another video on my channel. So today I'm joined with Gabriel from Rational Typology, and I'm going to ask him some questions about his system and personalities or typology in general. So could you please introduce yourself and let us know what type you are as well?
Okay, sure. I'm Gabriel from Rational Typology, a system that me and some other people came up with. I'm an INTJ. That's right. You did ask that, yeah.
Okay.
I'm feeling a bit sick right now, so if I say anything stupid, it's because I'm sick, not because I'm actually stupid.
Okay, whereas me, it's probably because I'm anxious. So you have your own system, like you've created your own typology system. So what kind of made you?
I think saying we created it is a bit pretentious because it's it's like getting what was already there and then refining it down so it has more exponential value rather than a proper creation.
Yeah. Okay, so what kind of made you decide to do that? Like what problems did you see with existing systems that made you kind of want to take a different direction?
So the main problems is that most systems have poor exponential value, which means they can mean multiple states at the same time, which means you can't make proper predictions from it. And if you can't make proper predictions from a system, then it's not a very good system. But that doesn't mean there isn't an underlying truth to it. So we've been focusing on getting to the underlying truth of it.
So how do you do that? Is that quite subjective to sort of like your own understanding?
Well, I guess my thought processes would be by definition. But the method was like trying to figure out the method in which the information is processed.
Okay.
And from that we got to defining the functions in a particular way, and then it seems to be very consistent with people. And because like I've made predictions about function like SI predictions, like functions about SI, and they've been correct predictions enough so that I was right about stuff, but the person themselves like didn't know that was how it worked until afterwards. Which is a sign of the model working as intended.
Okay. I've watched I think you've got two main videos about you explaining how it works, and I actually thought your definitions were really easy to sort of understand and follow. So I think that really helps as well. I think there's a lot of I think you might have said like some of them are quite vague and people might make assumptions about them that aren't necessarily actually true. So I thought that was really good. In terms of like how people take like Myers-Briggs, or I guess even with, I suppose Myers-Briggs isn't necessarily thought of in terms necessarily as the cognitive functions, and I think that can be like problematic. But what would you say to people who like completely disregard typology as like completely illogical, completely unscientific?
Well, to be fair, it does have a lot of problems, at least with most systems. So I can empathize with that mindset. But just because something has problems doesn't mean there isn't an underlying truth to it. And if like it's I guess it's the concept of like don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? It's just that idea.
Yeah, and it's very like theoretical based. It's not like and like it can be subjective, I think.
Well, yeah, that's a massive problem, that it can be subjective in most cases. Which is what inspired me to come up with proper definitions, and then see if those patterns played out in society and in like a personal way.
Yeah, but
yeah,
I think if it. Sorry, go on.
Sorry. If the patterns are playing out in a way that you've predicted, and the people don't know that you've predicted it, then it's the sign of something that's close enough to reality to be useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it does hold value to quite a lot of people. So what kind of value does it hold for you?
Value would be like an emotional claim.
Yeah.
But I guess it could be like functional. It's really helped in relating to people in a social way for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you understand people's functions, you can kind of engage with them in a way that they appreciate more.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say, how do you recommend other people use it? Because obviously some people probably don't use it in the healthiest way. I know previously, especially when I thought that I was a different personality type, I kind of didn't look into the functions, and it did almost become like part of my identity, which obviously is like a very bad way of using it. So what kind of way would you recommend is sort of the best way to use it within your own like life, I guess?
I wouldn't recommend defining yourself as anything in particular, because then that limits your potential to your understanding of yourself at the time.
Yeah.
So that's a bad idea. Don't do that. But I would recommend understanding what the functions do and seeing which one you are, because it's the frequency of the information processed.
Yeah.
So if you understand the definitions, you can type yourself if you understand them properly. And I know a lot of people just won't. So
Yeah.
I can actually do about that, but I just know that will happen.
I know that. I think that was my problem, not really understanding what a cognitive function was and how something is, where it sits in the stack as well. That was a struggle of mine.
Well, like which system? Because they're all different.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I was just watching like really random videos, but now I kind of like I've been reading books as well, which is kind of helping me a lot actually.
Yeah.
So this is really random. Is typology a kind of framework to understand humans, as if our functions are like computer software for sort of for people who need like that kind of framework to understand people better?
It might be hardware.
Okay, yeah.
Like,
Okay.
or it might be so fundamental to a method in which you have to process information that it's like the 16 types repeat themselves endlessly in different formations of species. Like that, I'm not saying that is the case, but it might be.
Yeah.
To test that properly, you need to get some brain scans of each type functioning, and then see if there was a overarching patterns.
I think
And
don't
to do
brain
that,
scans, don't they exist? I'm sure I've seen some brain scans that exist.
yeah, I am skeptical of who types them though,
Okay.
because for that step to occur properly, the person will need to type them proficiently, and I don't know that they have. Because if they're using something like Socionics, they're going to be mistyping SE users, and if they're using Myers Briggs, they're going to be like they're going to think NI is they're not going to have a good description of it because it's described as unconscious stuff. It's like, what does that mean?
Yeah. Do people so I guess with the functions it's sort of based on preference, isn't it? Like what you prefer to use. But how does a human like how does that like almost materialize? Is it like how their brain is already structured like as they're growing, or is it like a bit of
I
nurture as
don't
well?
know.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. There isn't data to really suggest that would be true, but there isn't data to suggest that wouldn't be true. So um like as I've said before, it is the method in which people process information. But I don't know if that's a developed thing or not. It could be, but I would be surprised if it were. Like, it might be I would be surprised if that was the case.
Yeah.
My inclination would like I probably think it's just you are your type, and then you can develop within your type, but you can't change your type.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess from that perspective, it's more like hardware. But what you can do is software. But then I guess it literally is software. So you're right because it's not. There isn't evidence of it being a physical thing, but
Yeah.
there might be evidence because it hasn't been tested.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, if I ever get the opportunity to test a large amount of people and then run brain scans, then I will be able to give you a proper answer.
Yeah. Do you have your own like personal method to type someone?
Yeah, it's the frequency in which they use the
Yeah.
yeah. So if you understand how the functions are defined, then it's pretty easy to type people.
Mm.
There is some barriers to that, like for example, people will say emotions, but they mean categories. So like that can happen.
Yeah.
So you have to watch them for like a while to type them properly. So it's
Yeah. So
I think it takes. Sorry.
So you can't just type someone, say, based on like one YouTube video that they've made. Would that be quite difficult to do?
It would depend on the length of it. If it was a couple of hours, you probably could. It would also relate to your personal ability to pick up on categories. So, like theoretically, INTPs should be the best at typing people, or ENTJ.
Yeah, I just need to study it a bit more.
So like theoretically that's true, but like maybe that could be like different processes like pattern recognition playing into it as well. So I'm not sure how that would work.
How do we know that there's only sort of 4 functions? How do we not know that there's like any more in existence that we just haven't spotted? Or do you think someone would have noticed?
I think there's 4 functions because if you break down reality into things you can operate, there's only 4 sections you can do that with.
Okay.
Because there's what you should be doing, which is F, right? There's how you're doing it, which is T. Then there's what your physical surroundings are, which is S. And then there's like linking together cause and effect structures, which is M.
Okay.
And you can't like you can subdivide within those existing categories, but you can't get outside of the categories. Which suggests that either the categories don't exist or we can't perceive them because we have 4 functions. Like we can't see things outside of the spectrum that we operate in. Or alternatively, you just can't break down reality into more incremental parts.
Okay. So everyone's reality is actually really subjective based on their own experience. So what is actual reality?
So actual reality is a thing, but no one knows what it is because we can't see it. So instead we make models. And we test the models, and that's how we know that things work. That's the only method we have that works, and everything else is silly.
Yeah.
That's why science works, and everything else doesn't.
Is that why, like, say, like, this might be a bit stereotypical, but like somebody who, like, my dad, who is like a censor, say I think he's an ISTP. Like, I'm not certain, but I think he is. Is that why he, like, if I'm talking about something fairly abstract, he just like completely disregards it if it's like not a real thing?
I don't know because I'd have to know what you're talking about.
Oh. I have no specifics.
Because like it might be that he knows better, right? Because he's got more information. But it might be that he's not picking up on the underlying structures, the underlying models, so he's disregarding them inappropriately.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't know that with the information I have.
Okay, what else have I got? Some things I've just written down like really randomly. Are NI users more likely to come up with their own typing system over any users?
Well, if we look at the people that are coming with their own typing systems, there's me, there's Dave, so that's 2 NI users.
Yeah.
There's one INFJ, so that's 3.
Yeah, I think I know who you mean.
Yeah, then there's
CS Joseph, what type's he?
there's another NI user. So yeah, CS Joseph.
Yeah.
For those of you that think he's an ENTP, he's an ENFJ. So then there's Eric, so he's an NA user.
Eric Thor?
What is he?
No, I don't think that's
Talking with Famous People. I think that's his channel.
Oh, that one, yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's got his own typing system.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, it seems like NI users are more likely common systems.
Yeah, because they can
from the evidence I have.
Yeah, from the evidence, but like more like from my understanding what NI is, and obviously I don't have NI, so it's just my own understanding. It seems that, and I've seen within my partner as well, we kind of can predict things based on sort of like cause and effect kind of things, which NE I don't think does the same. But then I sometimes think maybe TI could comes up with its own systems as well. So maybe that could
yeah
work.
I think that's true. Because NI is making patterns,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't have to be connected to any actual information. So whatever you feed the patterns with is what they're going to be connected to.
Mm-hmm.
So in my case, it's mostly TU, but it could also be FI and SE. But I couldn't do it to the same frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a primary NI user, you're going to have a bunch of like overarching like strategies of how things work, but they're going to be in a pattern sense.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're an INTJ or an INFJ, you're going to be doing it to such a frequency that you're going to like develop overarching strategies of how things operate, and that's going to get you very good at predicting things, or alternatively make you very silly because they can be wrong. Because with NE, it's at least attached to some external reference point. So they are patterns, but they're perceived to be linking between things that are external to yourself.
Yeah.
So
I see.
So as a result, they're at least tied to a thing. But with NI, it doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's like when my partner makes predictions about things. Like one example, when we'd returned from the supermarket and we sat in the car, and there's this woman in this like massive car which she was really struggling to park, and then she was like right in front of us, and my partner was just like, oh yeah, she's gonna stay there until we move, and we wanted to eat lunch, so we sat there eating in our car, and she was just sat there, and then she started walking around the car, and she was like looked as if she was talking to someone on the phone, and he's like, as soon as we move, she's going to come into our space. And I was like, how do you know that? Like, he's just like, oh, it's just obvious. And I'm like, how can you see that? Sort of, how can you know? And I think she did actually pull into our space once we left. It was really weird. We were sat there ages. It was just so odd. Like, how could he possibly know that? I don't know. That's something that I'd never be able to see.
Because patterns are stored and categorized as accurate or inaccurate. So with because if I remember correctly, your partner's an ENTJ.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if he's an ENTJ, then it's going to be storing and categorizing patterns that were successful.
Mm-hmm.
So there was probably some kind of like awareness of the function of that behavior, and then he would it links to this pattern.
I see. Yeah, he's rarely wrong, but he does, like, if he is wrong, he will admit that he's wrong. And I really like it when I can be like, actually, you're wrong about this, and I know this. But often I look it up and I'm like, oh, damn, you were right. It makes me feel really stupid. But yeah, I think NI is something that I'm just like, obviously have no idea, like, because I don't have it myself, but I'm just like quite amazed by it. More, I want to talk a little bit more specifically, like about sort of through my own experiences of like typing myself. Why do you think, other than just like people not knowing the definitions, why of like the functions, why do you think people get confused about what their functions are? Such as myself, like thinking that, oh yeah, I live by my values, that therefore I have FI, so that's probably me not fully understanding what the functions are. But why is it so hard for some people to really see themselves, and they're exploring it for a very long time and they can't really come up with what type they are? Like it wasn't, if it wasn't for the fact that you guys said to me, yeah, you are this type, I would still be searching, and then I wouldn't be like exploring it any further, because I'd be like, I'm never really certain what type I
am. So I think there's a couple of reasons. The most, I think the biggest issue is the things that define value. Because, like, as you said earlier, but you thought you're a INFP because of you adhere to your values. It's like, because values means like principles, and like who doesn't adhere to their principles? Like sociopaths.
Yeah.
So it's like saying the thing that you have to do. Like if you're adhering to, like, who would be like, I don't adhere to principles. And some people would, but they're not. That's like a different kind of issue. It's not a type issue. So it's a lot of that kind of stuff, just like things being defined in stupid ways. It's like like the way that NI is defined is really silly as well.
How so?
It's like unconscious awareness, and it's like, and NI is unconscious. It's like, what? So my predominant awareness is unconscious. What does that mean?
Yeah, my partner doesn't really.
Like, it's like, how do you know you got NI? Because you're unconscious. Like, search for people that sleep the most. There we go.
That's really funny. Like, but my partner, like, he doesn't like me like talking about this, because I'm just like, I don't understand how you get. I think I attack him a little bit with it, but he doesn't really have like an internal monologue. He like can force one, and he doesn't really see pictures in his mind, and those things are like how I live. Like I always have like loads of thoughts just like rushing through my head. I'm like, how can you come up with like thoughts and stuff? They must all be like buried, and I don't know, it's just crazy to me.
Sorry, I didn't hear that properly.
I would say like my partner doesn't really have much of an internal monologue.
Okay.
He said he can force it, but otherwise it's not really there. I don't know if it's because he lives so much in external reality, and then like that NI maybe is more unconscious, but it's just really weird to me.
I see things in like patterns. Yeah, so like I see things in like almost like code, I guess. There's like lines, and there's like variations of the lines, and that's how I like understand what's happening.
Okay, maybe if I say that to my partner, he will probably relate to that.
But I don't necessarily have an internal monologue, because I'm using like internal reference points.
That's really strange to me, because how do you think if you don't?
Well, with functions you don't have. Because me and Wilmus Robot have had the same discussion. So because he's got like a very active internal monologue as well, and he also represents things in physical ways internally, something that I don't do at all. Like I have like occasional images, but they're usually pretty like low fidelity.
Yeah, I do have. Like, if I just think of like where I work, I can just map out the entire, like all the rooms, all the offices. I can just map it out in my head. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, that's more of an like an SI trait.
Oh, okay.
So I can't do them.
How do you remember what things look like then?
I don't actually.
Oh.
I remember people by patterns. So, but they're all internal reference points. Like I could draw them, but nobody else would understand them.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Okay. I have one more question. So it's more related to INTPs and myself. In one of your videos explaining rational typology theory, you say that the extroverted functions perceive reality as if reality was made of that function. So that's like the definition. So if an INTP were to have, obviously they have FE as their last function. So it means that it's the slowest to update. How could that play out in their lives, and how could this be less of a problem for them?
Okay, so it's likely to play out in I'm having not many emotions, but they're going to be quite intense.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads to its own kind of issues. It will also be like perceiving patterns with an emotional context.
Okay. See, no, go on.
But a relatively archetypal emotional context that you probably have categorized as not working very effectively, so you probably ignore it.
Yeah, the way I kind of deal with my own emotions is generally try to ignore them, try to suppress them, see them as irrational. And sometimes that really works. And sometimes that could come out in like anger or like crying a lot, or just like one emotion, and I feel it for a bit and then I'm okay again. And generally how I get out of it is I just completely try and see it as like not having a function and just like being irrational, which is probably like I don't know if that's a really unhealthy way of dealing with it, but as soon as I give like a lot of meaning or like it's there for a purpose, it's like almost like I can't deal with it then, and it becomes a problem, and it can lead to me just feeling quite down a lot of the time. So I have to take away like the meaning from it, and then it's like, oh, that's just me being irrational, and I can sort of get over it and sort of like just go like read some information or something, and it like dissolves away. But I don't know if that's like the best way to deal with it, but that's how I deal with it.
I think that FE is the result of TI.
Okay.
So like if you imagine TI as beliefs that you hold, and this is going to include unconscious beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
but also conscious beliefs. It's how things technically operate. Another way to think about it is if it's a TI category, it means it can be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to FE categories they're not valid or invalid. They're a different kind of information.
Yeah. Okay.
Because a feeling can't be technically wrong. It can be inappropriate to the situation.
Yeah.
Because that's what you should be doing. So it can be like a maladaptive experience, like a maladaptive feeling, and that's always a result of the TI categories being like bad observations.
Yeah, I do a lot of like assuming how other people feel when I don't know, and I'm often wrong about it. And that assuming can lead to me being like annoyed with someone when I'm completely off the mark.
Yeah, like that's a good example of like a bad observation, like a bad category leading to an inappropriate experience. But I think that pattern is true in a way more fundamental way than people understand.
Okay.
Because the way that you are going to define your experience is going to be what you live, is going to be what you adhere to. So, for example, I had a friend that defined trauma as something that cannot be fixed. So, trauma is a negative emotion that cannot be fixed. Therefore, you don't try to because you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's in that case, they defined in a failure state. As opposed to like a more appropriate definition. It's like trauma is like a negative experience that is a result of like these processes playing out, which then if you define it like that, you can make adjustments to your behavior. So you can like avoid the situation in the future or do something about it. It's like you're not removing your aegis, so at least you can act.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you defined something as an emotion, then you have to experience the emotion if you think of the thing. Emotions are the emergent property of categories. So if you define a category to be an emotion, then you're defining it as itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
So try to, which always leads to circular reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
And you should avoid fallacies in your thinking as much as possible. Therefore, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah. Now I know that my type is INTP. I can use that, can't I, to sort of to my advantage.
It might be useful in regards to understanding how you operate.
Yeah.
Like it's probably quite like there would be INTP specific strategies, right? And then which if INTPs do, then they can be good in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like a lot of INTPs that I know about, like often have social anxiety.
Oh, really?
And I think that the reason for that is they're trying to use FE because everyone else is. Because they would have like been like, this is how people do social. I'll do the same thing, but it's not going to work for you. So instead, use TI and NE because
Okay.
because for an INTP they just can categorize like appropriate tactics of engagement. So if this pattern happens, then I'll do this. If this pattern did, I'll do this.
Right. Okay.
Like I couldn't do that very effectively, but then like an INTP can, and when they do that, they seem to be very effective at socializing.
I get on like, it's weird, but I get on really well in sort of like interviews and sort of situations where probably I rely on like my TINE.
Yeah.
But when it comes to more social situations where people are talking about how they feel and their emotions, even like with my family, I'm just like, I don't know what to say. I don't know like what to do, how to make them feel better. And I just feel so uncomfortable. Like if someone texts me something, like I literally say to Carl, like, what do I say back to them? Or I literally Google, and it's like a joke between INTPs online. INTPs like Google like how to help people with their emotions. I literally do because I don't know what would people would find comforting.
Like in the same way that we're talking to each other in this way, but like I couldn't have this conversation with an ENFJ because at this point they'll be annoyed at me because I would have been like being too technical in their experience, and they would be like, "Stop it! My experience is valid," and and
Yeah.
that would probably upset them because like the way that INTPs like to be spoken to is generally in a very technical manner, and that's probably not true in every case, but it is true in a lot of cases.
Yeah. When people are like with the people giving sympathy thing, I'm always like thinking what really are their intentions, why are they really talking to me like this, and it probably is just like because they're not like me, and they just generally are like that, but I'm always like,
it's also worth keeping in mind that people enjoy using their top three functions.
oh yeah.
So if someone's a FDOM, they're probably gonna be relatively fascinated by other people's emotional experience, and for you that might be more exhausting. So you probably wouldn't want to. They probably wouldn't want to. Like I don't want to burn out. I don't want to like ruin my day because I tried to understand someone's emotional framework.
Yeah, and if I do, if I feel like I'm just being fake. I've had this issue with men in particular where I pay attention to them and I'm really interested in talking to them, but I'm interested in what I'm talking to them about and they think I'm paying them attention. And this is like one of my lifelong problems. Like, why for some reason now they just think that I'm interested in them when I'm just interested in discussing a topic with them. And why can't they differentiate between you're laughing, but it's not funny. It's so annoying. Like, how can you stop that?
They're probably mistaking interest for attraction.
Yeah. So do I just need to be blunt?
It seems like it's that pattern playing out. I don't know. It might be because like INTP women are so unusual that it attracts just people because of that. It's very unusual kind of. Because it's not that unusual. Because you're just like a gender swap version of like woman's robot.
Oh really?
He's like my best. Yeah, he's like my best friend. And and your thought processes are so similar. I can use the same kind of tactics. It's very strange. Yeah, but it's like I don't know how to resolve that problem other than telling the truth. I mean,
Yeah.
that is how you resolve the problem.
Just try and say it in a nice way. I don't know.
You don't. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, maybe the way you communicate could be altered as well. So like, but I don't know, because guys get like that where they think that you're being affectionate when you're not actually being affectionate. So yeah, because you make it very clear that you have a partner. So
yeah,
I guess reinforcing that point. I guess
it's almost like it's disrespectful to be that way. I don't respect somebody who's like that with me.
Yeah, I think that if you've made it obvious that you're in a relationship and then somebody's trying to convince you out of it, it's like, especially if your relationship is healthy, like maybe in some cases where it's clearly there's clearly like an unhappy arrangement, then it might be a bit different. But I didn't get the impression with you, especially that you've been with the guy for like 9 years. Yeah, so what I mean, seems very I'm not sure what the attribute to assign that behavior to would be, but it seems inappropriate.
Yeah, I sometimes need someone else to be like confirm. Yeah, it is inappropriate.
Seems disrespectful. I think. I think I'd feel disrespected.
It's awkward.
Well, yeah, I do feel disrespected when women do that with me. So
yeah.
It's like you should have.
I also hate like getting compliments, in particular from men, about like my looks and things, and compliments on that. Like they hold no value to me. They're completely subjective. Like almost the point where I'm just like, if I get messages like that, I'm just like on Instagram, so I'm just like block, because I'm like, that's why do people go around doing that? Do they think people like it? Maybe people do like it, but I just can't stand it.
I can't imagine that strategy working.
No.
Giving random compliments to people on the internet. I feel like that strategy will fail 100% of the time. I don't know if that ever has worked for anybody. Like, tell me how, because that would be interesting. I just feel like every woman I've ever spoken to doesn't like that behavior, and so for that to be effective strategy, I'd be like, how would that happen? People like to engage in their top two functions. That's going to extend to relationship strategies. Like you can particularly see that when like thinkers date feelers. That there's often a disconnect in the way they're communicating. Yeah, because it's like you don't necessarily know that you're not expressing the thing that they are expressing. Like it's not obvious to me that I'm not expressing feelings when I know that I'm like I know now that I'm not, but I didn't know in the past.
Yeah. Same here.
Because I'm just like I did this for this reason. This is my feeling. It's like no, that is an action. It's an action, Gabriel. Do not pretend you have feelings when you're not.
Yeah.
And the reverse happens as well. So
are you saying you don't have feelings?
I think well, with the third function, it fades out under under a particular kind of stress, and the kind of stress is probably the flight or flight instinct triggering. It's probably that.
Oh, okay.
Because when that happens, the third function is repressed, and so for me that's FI. So when that happens, I'm primarily acting from like strategies.
So how would that play out for me?
Will be SI. So I imagine it would relate to like your physical surroundings.
Oh, so I just ignore everything around me?
Well, you might not know that you're ignoring it.
Oh, I do, because I bang into stuff all the time.
Yeah. But it would be like it's hard to categorize a lack of awareness because it's the absence of a thing, not a thing itself. So it would like it could relate to things like perhaps misquoting people.
Okay.
And it would probably relate to just a lack of physical awareness. in heightened situations. But when it comes to the misquoting thing, you'll probably get the pattern and the function correct, so it probably won't even matter very much.
Okay.
Like it oscillates in significance depending on the on the type. Because for like, if it's your F function, then you're probably gonna be mean to people inadvertently.
What do you mean?
Like if it's in your third position and it's an F function and that's suppressed, you're gonna like not be aware that you're being mean to people if you're in like an argument.
Okay.
Like it'll probably result in that kind of behavior.
Okay.
I have noticed a general tendency of INTJs and INTPs getting along quite well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
don't
know if I know
it presents itself.
life.
Any INTJs?
I don't think so.
Yeah, we're pretty rare. I'm pretty sure I haven't met another INTJ in person. And I travel around a lot, so like it's kind of just it's not surprising, but it's like that's how unusual it is, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything else to say.
Okay. So you got any more inquiries about rational typology? I'm pretty sure there was a question about criticisms of the community. We haven't answered that.
What question I thought you had?
I think you sent them through.
But I don't remember what I said.
I'm pretty sure that one of them was problems with the community.
I sent you some questions, though. I don't remember this. Are you laughing? I can't find them. Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Can you just say like kind of what I meant?
I'm pretty sure it was problems with the community.
What, like just the MBTI community? Which, by the way, you don't? I never hear you say the word MBTI. What
MBTI.
Do you try and avoid it?
I feel like MBTI is a specific system.
Yeah.
Because there's like MBTI socionics. And I feel like they're different things, but it depends how you're using it, I guess.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, so as in problems I had with the community and what they were.
Oh, I think it was in relation to what I thought problems were.
Okay.
And I think there is problems with the community, but I think there's problems with every community. So I think it's more of a human nature kind of thing.
Yeah. I generally like get really annoyed with a lot of people's comments. Even like I've been watching your videos and I'm just getting annoyed with people's comments.
You can't take them personally.
Yeah, I know. And I do like that's something that I struggle with. Like I think they're just saying to me like, because if I said something to somebody, I generally would mean it, and so I'm just like, well, they really hate me.
Well, they might mean it, but their reference points might be completely different from yours.
Okay, so I need to take a step back and like actually consider if it fits in with my like framework.
Well, they might even be like they might be trying to be like misleading or sarcastic because of the internet. And I know that I will do things like that with people in real life. I would try to like act in a way that's bizarre.
Okay.
So, like
trolling.
I'm not sure if it's. I'm not really trying to upset them. I'm trying to kind of interrupt. They might also just have a very bad understanding of the subject matter. Like the whole people that don't know much think they know a lot. Some people like that, and then that they'll say things that like are in relation to different systems when they're talking about like a system that's removed from them, and so they just don't actually understand what they're talking about. Like I've noticed that happening quite frequently. Or people will make just kind of like random assumptions about seemingly trivial things, and then like assume that has exponential value when it doesn't.
I do. I have seen that.
Or like I'm pretty sure somebody said I was like I'm pretty sure somebody said I was an ISFP because I had purple hair, but I didn't have purple hair. And even if I did, that would not make me that type, because INTJs can have purple hair.
Did you have a purple light shining on you?
Like, I think it might have looked like that in like the image.
Okay. But, okay. It's an image.
But in the actual video, it was like, so like things like that can happen.
I watched a few episodes of you and the Warmest Robot.
Oh yeah.
Well, I struggled at first because I was trying to play them in my car, and you were talking so quietly. But I see you've resolved that issue.
Okay.
And so when I did get around to listen to them, I thought they were really funny, but I thought they were really like very brutal.
Yeah,
and I think people in the comments really took it like to heart almost what you were saying sometimes. And so I'm always true. Like I was trying to be nice in my videos because I don't want to attract that kind of attention.
I like I'm just okay with people criticizing me.
Like have you always been like that though? Or?
I think I've become more like that the older I've gotten.
Yeah.
I think when I was a kid, I was just very trying to understand people, and I think at a certain point I got like disappointed to the point that I was okay with teasing people.
Yeah.
Which wasn't a healthy strategy. I'm not saying that I currently do that, but I think that's what kind of like started off the like I would just kind of see what people do.
I find that people that I feel the most natural around, or the way I can like be myself more, is when I'm kind of just being quite playful, and like that's why like I really liked my ENTP friend a lot, because I could just like banter with him, and we could just make fun of each other, and it's almost like that's how I show affection, because that's the way I'm comfortable with showing affection. But to other people on the outside, they might be like, one time somebody came up to me and said, I don't think like this ENTP really meant what he was saying, and I'm like, you've completely like misinterpreted how I feel about the situation.
Yeah.
And it's fun for us, and we're almost like we're like who can insult each other the most. But if somebody who's not like that does that to me, I'll more likely take it a bit more to heart, I think.
Yeah. I could just be a consequence of growing up in like quite a confrontational environment, but also being in Australia, because Australia, at least where I grew up, was just more like had a lot more banter, I think.
Yeah.
Like being polite isn't really a good strategy in like where I grew up. It just didn't work properly, so I didn't really try to do it. Yeah, so. But then also, I just think it's funny. Like I think insulting people is just funny by itself. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I saw your video. I was actually watched it before we started today, but I watched a video on Ricky Gervais, and I knew that he was an ENTP, but I've heard so many people type in as an ENFP, and I'm like, I don't understand how they can do that when a lot of his humor is like what I find funny, what I'd say I find funny, where with ENFP's humor, doesn't do the same. It doesn't have the same effect on me. And that kind of like, it's almost like my humor can be like that. Like with me and my partner, we're very focused on like logical inconsistencies, like the way we and like puns and things like that.
Yeah.
And so like, I always thought that he was an ENTP. But yeah, I can't remember what my point was, what I was saying. But yeah, I actually, that video really helped me to understand sort of like my humor as well.
Yeah, because INTP and ENTP humor is similar, kind of, but with INTPs, it's more focused around pointing out category inconsistencies. It's like this category did not match this category.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I think probably one of the things is like when I've tried to be what I would say is funny, like what I think is funny, other people have taken offense. So I've just like been like, oh, I can't do this. I can't be like this way unless I'm like unless somebody really knows where I'm coming from. Whereas Ricky Gervais is just does it with everybody. I'm like, I want to be like that. I want people to know that I actually have a sense of humor, but they don't get me.
Like you can be like that, but it will be at the expense of like rapport. So that's a decision you have to reach by yourself. But I think it's true with thinkers that they find like misaligned categories funny, and that is a lot of what the humor's about.
Yeah.
And with more like F-based humor, it's more about like a situation feeling off. Like it's not the same kind of humor. It's more like relatable humor. Like I think Frank James is a good example of like relatable humor, and he executes it very well.
Yeah.
And I could not do that if I like tried. I would just be bad at it.
Yeah, that's probably why he's become quite successful actually. Yeah, like I try to avoid like trying to be funny with because she goes, she doesn't really necessarily go like, oh, you're being mean. She'll just go really quiet. And I know, like, oh dear, I've upset her again. So I have to sort of hold back. But when I'm holding myself back, it drains me. Like I'm just like, I don't want to be in that situation anymore. And if that's how I feel like a lot of the time when I'm communicating with people, it's no wonder I just want to spend most of my time alone.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Yeah, that's true for me as well. There's this concept of like a safe space where people can feel comfortable to not be teased, but there needs to be like the other side of that where people are comfortable with being teased.
Yeah,
like that there needs to be because that's where people like me want to hang out, because I don't specifically want to offend people, but I just know I will. And it's kind of like this kind of sensation of like walking on eggshells, and you don't really want to be in a lot of different social situations.
We go back to the community, MBTI community thing. Mostly when I say like the MBTI community, I'm on about like YouTube commenters. I generally read like a lot of comments. Like even when I watch a video, I'm just like scrolling through looking at the comments. And I think lots of people just seem to be so off the mark. It's like, how do you, I don't know. I think that's maybe why it doesn't give a lot of validity to MBTI in general, because people have so many different like ideas about it that's not necessarily true.
But like you can't judge the idea by how people relate to the idea. That's a bad way to make decisions.
Yeah.
Because that would be like saying that science is wrong because people don't understand science. That would be like those people, they clearly don't understand science, and then they make claims about science, and like Kent Hovind, for example.
Who?
Kent Hovind, I think you'd like him if you look him up.
Okay. How do you spell that?
Very insightful person.
Kent Hovind. Okay, I'll have a look.
He's got interesting theories about the shape of the Earth.
Oh right. I really tried to understand where these people were coming from.
If you understand it through like a processing informational standpoint, it's pretty effective because you can kind of predict what they're going to say after that. At least I can.
Yeah, is that their arguments is, I don't know if this is what this guy is like, but like people who are seemingly quite delusional, often they're like, I know somebody whose argument is like, you know, take what you resonate with, that means it's true, like true to you. And I'm like, okay.
What does resonate mean?
I'd say like it's a very FI thing. It's more like,
because I'm thinking of someone like vibrating at a certain frequency.
So like if someone felt that they were like a certain emotion, like it's kind of like relating. So if something kind of like relates to their idea of like their identity or something.
Okay, so things you can identify with.
Yeah, kind of like that. But then that's so subjective anyway, so that's not what truth is. Which truth can be subjective anyway, but I mean, like some of the things people come out with, their arguments.
Wait, truth cannot be subjective.
Yeah. Okay, let's just say truth cannot be subjective.
It cannot be subjective.
Let me try and think where I'm coming from that. I think I'm more thinking about like people's experiences and the way they see things.
Like qualia isn't truth. It's your perceptions of things.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Because truth means that that's how things work.
See, I'm not a real INTP.
But like okay. It's true that there can be strategies that work for some types and not for other types. So
right. I think that's what I'm
in that sense, like in that sense that because something can be like if you define truth as effective, which some people do, then things can be asymmetrically truthful. But I'd argue that something that is effective is not necessarily truthful, and something that is truthful is not necessarily effective.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, what was I talking about? Yeah, like there's somebody I know who I met online who like I was getting on with. Right, I'm pretty sure it's an INFP, who all of a sudden has turned into somebody who shares a lot of information about conspiracies, and obviously some conspiracies might have truth to them. I can't just like deny that, but the way that it's really hard for me to explain. Everything you say or every argument against it, they have an answer for. So you could say, well, I'm trying to think of a specific example, but I can't really. Some of their arguments will be, I don't know, because I haven't actually spoken to this person for a while. But like, oh, that's what they want you to think. Like, of course, that's what that's what like they, meaning like.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that culture.
And so there's no way of reasoning with them at all. It's like a cult mentality kind of thing.
It's when people use unfalsifiable claims to back up their assertions.
Yeah.
Like for example, there is a literal dragon behind me. You're like, no, there's not. I'm like, it's invisible.
Well, I think they.
I can't feel it
like
either.
A real dragon, not a picture of a dragon. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's invisible. Also, you can't feel it. It's like, how do you know it's there? It's like, I just do. In this culture, and I know that we're in different cultures, but there's more similarities than there are differences.
Yeah.
And it's probably true in just the globe as well, that there is way more feelers than thinkers.
Yeah.
Like just the frequency of thinkers is just less. And so like what might be normal for you is abnormal for most people. So So they're going to see you through their lens and be like, you're acting in a cold way.
Yeah.
You're acting in a warm way for your type. And I think people need to be more like more accepting of how people process information, because it's not something you can actually change, and I don't think you even should change. Like, I think that you should try to work. Like, I think you should try to work with the strengths of whatever your type is.
Yeah, I think especially when I was getting into thinking about like INFPs a lot, some INFPs seem to be so, like, the more that I would say assertive types, or the more creative types, they kind of like suppress. It's almost like they completely ignore their TE, like completely.
Well, wouldn't that be like the same as you ignoring emotions?
Yeah, but do I completely ignore it though? Is that how
like you said earlier, that your strategy for coping with being upset was to ignore your emotions.
Right, ignore my emotions, but it doesn't mean that I'm still not feeling quite depressed because of them. I'm just trying to.
You can't actually escape your functions.
Okay.
That's true for INFPs as well. If they do ignore their TE, they're going to lead to obvious issues, because they're going to be ignoring what how type operates.
So you can't ignore your lust. So I don't really understand what you're trying to say, because if you
so you can ignore it,
yeah,
but it will lead to issues.
Is that kind of like the whole? That's the whole premise.
You can't
of
not
like
experience it.
Jung's, like, to do with like Jung's theory, isn't it? Like how like you suppress like your like shadow side or whatever he says, and it will come out eventually.
I'm not sure, but I get the impression he was referring to negative emotions, and that you should integrate those systems into the larger systems to act in a congruent fashion. But I might be completely wrong.
Yeah.
So feel free to call me an idiot.
No, I think you make sense.
When it comes to ignoring your loss function, you totally can, and you totally should. And depending on what the function is, this can lead to different kinds of issues, as you would expect.
I've read, I've tried to read online, like I've just Googled, which probably is the worst way to do it. Googled like how can an INTP like develop their last functions more, or have them so they're not such an issue. And people say like with INTPs, oh, you need to be around people more, but I don't think that makes me feel any better.
Well, that's not going to help.
No, so that is just bad advice, and I'm not like thinking, well.
I think that's unhelpful, and that's going to lead to further issues. So so that is easier to ignore your last function doesn't mean it won't have an impact on you. Okay. Right. So but it's going to have an impact in ways that you don't expect, because you're ignoring that information.
Yeah.
That's true for every time. So it's like, if your last function is FE, then you're probably not going to want to spend a lot of time with very emotional people. It's probably going to be very taxing. So I just would recommend not doing that.
Yeah.
Like, or alternatively, engaging with emotional people with NE and TO. Like in your case, and then for like ISTPs, then it'll be like SE and TO. But they'll be more focused on TI, because that would be like a more efficient. And that strategy is very effective.
Yeah.
Okay. And then dealing with the emotions in like your spare time, like figuring out what your underlying assumptions of how things operate are, and then making appropriate addendums to that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then like the feeler alternative, if you have TE as your last function.
I feel like I'm just rambling now. yeah, so I don't really have anything else to say.
Okay.
They look like my battery's running out.
Okay. Well,
Okay,
see ya.
Bye.